right now, though, with the top story. FBI Director Chris Wray testifying on Capitol Hill. Now, this is the first time that he is speaking in this forum, pressed adversarially by senators, since that report came out that we brought you on the January 6th riot. And there was quite the political divide on display, even though the FBI director's job, like those agents and like police, would be to just focus on the safety and security of the Capitol. And you'd think that would be hopefully the kind of thing that people could get behind regardless of party. But that wasn't the case. Now, Democrats pressed on why the FBI was not also investigating Donald Trump. Republicans pressing more about why the FBI is part of an independent DOJ investigation that has touched on Donald Trump's lawyer, Rudy Giuliani.
Have any of these words been reviewed to determine whether or not President Trump words and deeds should be referred to the Department of Justice as contributing to the violence of the insurrectionists on January 6th?
I'm not aware of any investigation that specifically goes to that.
Did you sign off on the raid on Mayor Giuliani's apartment?
Again, I'm not going to discuss any specific investigation.
Did you sign off on this specific FBI activity where the president's personal lawyer's apartment in Manhattan was raided?
And again, I'm not going to discuss any specific investigation.
And then you have a moment fit for our times. One of the MAGA favorites, Congressman Matt Gaetz, who, according to public accounting as well as his own statements, has been a subject of an FBI investigation that touches on sex trafficking and already has a separate conviction. He was the one questioning the very FBI director whose agents executed a search warrant and seized Gaetz's phone back in December. It's that kind of day on the Hill, and we have more updates for you. But I want to first bring in our guests, Michael Steele, former RNC chair, and Washington Post reporter Libby Casey. Michael, we don't actually need to play a ton from the hearing because while there were some tidbits and some important points and some people being serious, there was a lot of the partisan posturing or repeating questions that aren't even going to get answered in order to prove to someone somewhere watching that this was what was being brought up. What do you take from what is still and what should be an important moment when the FBI director faces the Senate for the first time since it's done its miniature, not full investigation of that riot?
Well, my take is in any other universe, all the actors sitting on those dais who, are, looking down in judgment, would take it seriously and would bring that level of seriousness to their questioning and to really trying to get to whatever truth the hearing was called to find out and discover or learn more about. Director Wray is doing what, he's going to do. He's not going to answer questions, obviously, on specific matters. I find it a little bit cheeky rich that, you got Matt Gaetz who's asking him questions. If I were Wray in that moment, would have said, you know what, sir, I'm going to avoid answering a question because you're currently under investigation by my department. That would have been a rich moment just to sort of speak to the craziness of the politics. But that also tells us where we are here, that, what are we trying to get at with this and what more are we trying to learn? And I think for the American people, it's a lot of, okay, didn't we do that already? Why is Wray testifying again? And I don't know if that's, how the Dems have postured this particular hearing in the public's eyes so that is a question. I had a couple of people ask me about it. It's like, what's going on with this again? I thought that was Mueller and that was done. And certainly the Republicans are going to play it as if it is nothing more than a repeat of the witch hunt, to use their term, that went after Donald Trump, which is what Jim Jordan was getting at, which was just uselessness sitting in a chair.
Well, Michael, you raise several great points, including one that I want to bring Libby on, which is the double bind that the DOJ and the FBI as part of the DOJ is in. I mentioned the congressional investigation was that House report that looked at January 6th. Meanwhile, there hasn't been, of course, the larger commission that's been called for. But, Libby, what Michael raises, and our colleague Rachel Maddow has been pressing on this, is that the DOJ and FBI are in this special bind where they obviously, the people there were put through the Trump pressures. And there were a lot of attacks on the rule of law and independence of those entities. And just this week, we had the transcript come out about the attempt to fire Mueller and other things that might have been a second Saturday Night Massacre. And so, Libby, how do you have to look at the challenge of someone like Wray, who's a holdover from the Trump administration, Merrick Garland, who's the new attorney general, nominally his boss, although we've all learned about FBI directors sometimes act like they don't have any other boss at DOJ. How do they both deal with what Michael just referred to, which is a total fatigue of all those issues, and yet also not just say, well, I guess we'll just go back to pre-Trump normal as if all that stuff didn't happen? Because that's a balancing act that's really quite tricky for restoring independence there.
Well, one of the ways that can be done is by answering directly questions about January 6th. And we did hear the director today call it extremist violence. We have to remember, Ari, more than 100 officers were injured. There have been more than 500 arrests, and the FBI director said we can expect some more serious charges to be announced. But this gets to the heart of, are we living in a revisionist history, or are we willing to look directly and squarely at what happened over the past year and frankly, in the years preceding that? Because there are some real questions that Democrats specifically were asking about regarding President Trump's behavior, his words, and what led to the attack on the Capitol on January 6th. Now, the FBI director wouldn't go with what one of the Democrats wanted to do and call the riot an insurrection. He sort of demurred on that. But these labels are important because they get to the heart of just what happened. And, you know, like so many House hearings, you feel like you're in two separate worlds. It's like you feel like you've changed the channel between hearing, between events when you hear a Republican ask a question that is just totally disconnected from what the Democrats are asking about and probing. Sometimes that can be useful because it sort of bites at the apple from different angles, but sometimes it just feels so partisan. And we didn't really, learn a whole lot today. There's still a lot of questions, including about this report that came from the FBI's own Norfolk field office before the attack happened on January 6th that seemed to sort of predict what might happen. And we have a lot of questions about why that intelligence wasn't followed up on. And in order to get those answers, there needs to be a reckoning and a real probing here in a focused, deliberative way.